Reconstructing Satin Doll. Let's perform a harmonic analysis on Satin Doll by Duke Ellington and Billy Strayhorn. But rather than start at the end, let's start at the beginning, a blank page, and think like a composer. Before we begin, a few caveats. This is not to presume the songwriter's actual process. This is simply a creative approach to analysis, one that will hopefully illuminate the underlying harmonic grammar. If you're not yet fluent in the language of music, i.e. music theory, this may be a bit esoteric. Also, there are different versions of this chart. I'm using the one from the 5th edition Real Book because I like it the best. Suppose we want to write a jazz tune. Let's start with the form. A classic is the AABA form. It goes by other names, but I'll use AABA for now. We'll start with an A section. That will repeat with perhaps slight variation. Then we'll bring in a contrasting B section and wrap it all up with a return to A. Each section will be 8 bars long. This conforms to tradition and will give the song a certain structural integrity. We'll also need to decide the meter and the key. For meter, we'll use simple quadruple, swung of course, because jazz, giving us a time signature of 4/4. And let's put this in a major key, C major. Next, let's give each section a harmonic focal point. In other words, we're going to place a tonal function at the core of each 8-bar passage. This will imbue a specific chord with tonal gravity and dictate the orientation of all the other chords in proximity. The archetypal harmonic sequence is to begin with the tonic, move to the subdominant, then to the dominant, and finally return to the tonic. Here's one way we can graft that sequence into our 32-bar AABA form. Our entire A section centers on the tonic. This will do several things. 1, it will establish the key center right off the bat. 2, it will build a yearning for the other harmonic functions because there are 2 A sections back to back. 3, the momentum will increase in the B section because both the subdominant and the dominant will be squeezed into one 8-bar passage. And 4, it ensures a satisfying ending as the A section returns, bringing along with it the tonic. As mentioned, the subdominant and the dominant have to share the B section. We'll give both equal portions, 4 bars each. Now let's start adding actual chords. The first most logical step is to use the primary diatonic chords associated with each harmonic function. The 1 chord for tonic function, the 4 chord for subdominant function, and the 5 chord for dominant function. Of course, we'll make them all 7th chords because jazz. We could stop here, leaving the chord progression relatively basic and weaving in a sensible yet compelling melody, but jazz does like to spice things up quite a bit, even in its more subdued moments, so let's keep going. To construct a more complex chord progression while maintaining the balance of our overall structure, let's evenly divide our 8-bar sections into 2-bar phrases. With this design, each pair of measures will work as a harmonic unit, and all units will orbit their harmonic focal point. Let's first take a pass at the A section, because this will set the tone and themes of the piece. As you can see, our A section has become a microcosm of the whole song. It starts on the tonic, moves to the subdominant, which in this case is the auxiliary subdominant chord, the 2, then goes to the dominant, and returns to the tonic. The 1 chord bookends the whole section, and the 2 and the 5 chords are oriented toward that tonic, meaning we will experience the 2 and 5 as being pulled into the gravity of the 1 chord. This also introduces that quintessential jazz progression, 2-5-1. We copy and paste this to the other 2 A sections, and our song has become slightly more sophisticated. Still, it's quite simplistic as far as jazz goes, and these moments of harmonic rest are kinda killing the buzz. We need more juice. Before we take this next step, we should quickly look at the 2-5-1 chord progression. This is quite a ubiquitous and versatile little nugget of harmonic vocabulary. Its purpose is clear, to tonicize whichever chord is in the 1 position. Also, playing with tonal gravity is the name of the game in jazz. Any chord can be tonicized by preceding it with that chord's dominant, i.e. its 5 chord. Wherever a 5 chord goes, a 2 can certainly come along for the ride, giving the impending tonicization even greater impact. Sure, you can use the diatonic 2, 5, and 1 chords all day long, but jazz is pretty trigger-happy with that tonicization gun, and our ears like it. Jazz loves to tonicize any and every chord in the key, and even chords outside the key. This is why we so often see secondary dominants, 5 of 2, 5 of 6, etc. And those are sometimes expanded with secondary supertonics, 2 of 2 and then 5 of 2, 2 of 6 and then 5 of 6, and so on. Furthermore, when we hear a 2, then 5, we know exactly what's supposed to happen next, the 1, really meaning whichever chord is the target of that particular tonicization. So if we hear a diatonic 2, then a diatonic 5, we expect the diatonic 1 to be next. If we hear a 2 of 4 and then a 5 of 4, we expect to hear the 4 next. This expectation is so ingrained that composers often exploit it for dramatic effect. One way they do this is by delaying or omitting the resolution. They give you the 2 and then the 5, but the 1 arrives late or never shows up. Nevertheless, that 2 and that 5 reliably evoke their 1. They are pointing to, oriented toward that 1 chord. Keep this in mind as we take this next step. At first glance, it might seem like a lot just happened, but not really. Let's look closer. In our first 2-bar phrase, we initially had a 1 major 7 chord. There's nothing wrong with starting that way, but it's pretty vanilla. Alternatively, we can evoke the essence of that 1 chord by playing its 2 and 5 instead. Once we hear these chords, we will be expecting the 1 chord. As composers, we can elicit that response and drive up the dramatic tension by delaying gratification. Not only that, but it's also as if the 1 chord is here, just in spirit only. We can repeat this gesture, thereby justifying the move and establishing a theme. Moving over to the next 2-bar phrase, we see it underwent the same treatment. We initially had a 2 minor 7 chord, but it was replaced by its 2 and 5. 2 minor 7 of 2, then 5 7 of 2. Like before, it's repeated, and like before, we don't get the resolution immediately after. In fact, we never get it. Instead, we're propelled into yet another dimension of secondary harmonic heaven. Here we are in the third 2-bar phrase where once there was an ordinary 5-7 chord, but now there are only secondary supertonics and secondary dominants. The 5-7 is nowhere to be found. Instead, we have a 5-7 shaped whole, the boundary of which is outlined by the 2 minor 7 of 5 and the 5-7 of 5. The implied chords are hovering above each phrase in parentheses to remind us what these measures are really about. Again, we copy and paste this to the other A sections. We also come down to our B section and work the same magic. These passages are a bit more satisfying because we do ultimately get to our target chord without too much delay. But we're not done yet. This version has a couple issues. One is the stagnation that occurs after the arrival of each vocal chord. This is where it's helpful to remember that harmonic progressions rely on the momentum that comes from forward-looking chords, chords that create an expectation of what's next. Since 2-5-1s have become our main tool for harmonic interest, let's use them again to fill these gaps and keep the ball rolling. At the end of our first A section, we now have a minor 2-5 that leads us right into the diatonic 2 chord at the top of our second A section. 2 minor 7 flat 5 of 2, followed by 5 7 flat 9 of 2, resolving as expected into the 2 minor 7. Our 1 chord still gets special treatment, a whole bar unto itself, but the end of the first A section no longer plateaus. Instead, it spills over the double bar line into the next section. Down here at the end of B, we do something similar. This time, though, it's a major 2-5 leading to the minor 2 chord. This is a common move, just another way for composers to subtly mislead the listener. And in our final bar, we'll toss in an optional turnaround, that same minor 2-5 from above, which will bring us back to the top of the chart if we decide to take another pass. Note that the orange chords are the only places in which a 2-5 resolves to its 1 directly, and the blue chords indicate a delayed resolution, although some of these are about to change. All other 2-5s only imply but never actually arrive at their target chord. What are we going to do about these other empty measures? Also, there's a missing link in the A section. Yes, this 2 minor 7 of 5 and 5 7 of 5 imply the diatonic 5 chord, but that ain't going to cut it. At such a climactic moment, the long anticipated appearance of the 1 chord, we're going to need more than an allusion to the dominant. Plus, hearing a 5 7 of 5 followed by the diatonic 1 is going to sound abrupt and disjunct. Let's fix all that and finish this tune. We'll cover these last additions in order from least to most interesting. Here in the subdominant portion of the B section, we've added another 2 of 4 and 5 of 4. It's not revolutionary. In fact, it borders on lackluster because we've heard it twice before and it's already been resolved. This time, though, it's unfinished, and we sequence up a step to the same idea in the dominant sphere. We think we're getting more subdominant, but the dominant passage comes swooping in. Speaking of, this unassuming 2 chord snuck in under the radar. Here, we have an example of overlapping 2-5-1s. The preceding 2 minor 7 of 5 and 5 7 of 5 want to resolve to the 5, which we ultimately do, but it's delayed just slightly. Not only that, but this inserted chord begins yet another 2-5 progression leading to our tonic, which is also delayed. In this moment, the 5-7 chord is reaching back in time to finish its duty as the target of an earlier, secondary 2-5, after having been commandeered by the interceding diatonic 2 chord for service to our overarching key center. This interweaving of several 2-5s in a short amount of time, plus the displacement of the 5-7 into a weak rhythmic position, give this passage a cascading, tumbling, head over heels feel. Also, it prevents the 5-7 chord from becoming even a fleeting moment of genuine resolve, thereby making this the longest stretch of harmonic tension. When we finally get to the 1 chord at the end, the release is that much greater. Now let's see what we did to segue into the B section. We need to take a step back and remember what these 2 phrases are really intimating. The end of the second A is essentially a 1 chord, and the beginning of B is essentially a 4. Holding this in view, one way to get from 1 to 4 is to perform a standard walk-up in the bass, C, D, D sharp, E. And why not take it further by harmonizing each of these bass notes? Well, the D and the E are diatonic, so we can stick with the diatonic chords there. The chromatic D sharp begs for a passing diminished 7th chord, which, incidentally, serves as the 7 diminished 7 of the subsequent 3 chord. And finally, we must address this wonky bit in the A section. What we need is an unambiguous expression of the dominant. The quick solve is to simply use the diatonic 5, but we can do even better. Tritone subs to the rescue. We can plug in a tritone sub 5-7. And because we've given a 2 to each 5 everywhere else, we won't make an exception here. Here's a tritone sub 2 minor 7. Now we have a satisfying and sophisticated progression to the 1. Not only that, but this tritone sub phrase is also an excellent sequence of the previous 2 bars, just down a half step. The result is super smooth. We copy and paste this to the other A sections, and voila, we're done. This is a harmonic analysis of Satin Doll. To recap, we've used 2 5s, a fragment of the familiar 2-5-1 progression, as a theme and as a device for indirectly referencing harmony. The pink chords in parentheses above the staff indicate the implied chords in each unit, And these map out the fairly basic chord progression underlying Satin Doll. In fact, the tonic, subdominant, dominant, tonic cycle is expressed at every level of the harmonic progression, from macro to micro, creating fractal dimensions. The first unit implies our tonic, initiating the listener's expectation of that chord. That anticipation grows as we move to the next unit, an implied but never resolved 2 minor 7 chord. It reaches a zenith in the third unit with a similarly implied 5 chord, followed by a tritone substitution of our diatonic 2-5. At long last, the 1 appears, 7 bars into the piece. We 2-5 our way back into the top of another A section and do it all again. This time, we transition to our B section by harmonizing a bass walk up to the 4. This 4 is delayed, though, as we're met with our thematic 2-5 implication gesture. We have a brief moment of rest, but a part of us knows this is not our primary key. This is quickly confirmed by the ratcheting up into the dominant. We get the same evasive maneuvers and then some as the diatonic 2 interjects to begin spiraling us back down to earth, our key center. But it's a rather long journey. We see old friends, our diatonic 2 and 5. The finish line seems within reach, but we're whisked away by a cheeky major 2-5 to our minor 2 and sent reeling back around the same track as before. Finally, sweating and ravenous, we're satiated with the quite elusive 1 chord. I hope you enjoyed this nerdy journey down the rabbit hole of Satin Doll's chord progression. Until next time.